Good evening, everybody. Welcome to York History Group. My name is Kevin Freeman. It is January 27th, 2021. Before we get started tonight with our special guest, by the way, we're going to be talking about genealogy. I know it's a very popular topic, so stay tuned for that. But first, I wanted to let you know that I have been photographing some old newspapers that were given to me by Jakey Raymond Ware about 7 or 8 years ago. They've been in a back room on a shelf for several years, and I recently have pulled them out and I have started to photograph them and put them on a website. So they're going to be available for the public to be able to look through. And I'm going to put that link right here in just a minute. So you'll get to see that and hopefully check them out. I also want to let you know that we are keeping up to date with our YouTube channel. You can go over to York History Group on YouTube. Just type that in and you should come up to our library of videos there. And Kevin's Book Corner. This is getting to be a regular thing, which I kind of like because I love to read books. And one of the books that I'm currently reading is called India, New England Before the Mayflower by Howard Russell. And it's a really nice overview of what pre-contact probably looked like. It can only be speculative and hypothetical, I guess, but nonetheless, it's done quite sensitively, and it kind of paints a really amazing picture of what was most likely happening here before the Europeans arrived. So if you get a chance to check this out, let me know. I'd love to discuss it with you. So with that, we're going to turn things over to Kevin Mckinney and see what he has to say.
Hey, good evening. Everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
I just want to take a couple moments and thank everybody that shared some pictures. There's some really fantastic pictures put out there. Cheryl Dixon put one on of a bunch of Boy Scouts in 1913. Only knew the troop leader's name, Fred Manson, but it's just a fantastic photo. And Elaine Wood and I were looking back and forth at it. And it's too bad we don't know more of the players there, but that's the type of stuff we're looking for and trying to save. And Cindy Martin put some pictures up, Cindy Martin Blanchard, York Beach Days in 1936. Great stuff, great stuff. And we're just trying to preserve York history here. The Stu and Deb Pennington are still going through 4 boxes of stuff that's been in their family 100 plus years. They just actually sent over a wedding invite to my great aunt's wedding from 1928. And she died in childbirth in 1930, but it came down through their family along with other stuff of my family. So the point being, there's stuff out there that includes all of us. And so that's a great thing that, this site is bringing up stuff. I do want to mention that town has settled on a recipient for the Boston Post cane. There's going to be a presentation coming up. I'm not going to yell it out tonight. A lot of people pretty much know who it's going to be. You don't get to be close to 103 without everybody in town knowing. So that is going to happen. There's a lot of stuff in the background that is happening with York history, but Corona has slowed everybody down a whole lot. It's been a perfect time the last year to read and sit in the house and just research, and we all like that. A lot of us old historians. But anyways, that's all I have to say for now. Back to you, Kevin, and I'm anxious to hear our guest tonight.
Okay, so our guest is Kristen Lewis, and she has a business called Kin Connection. And I did misspell her name, which I've apologized for on the promotions for this. Her first name is spelled Kristin. So sorry about that again, Kristen. So Kristen, you want to start out by telling us a little bit about what you do and how that you start with a family that's interested in having a family tree created.
Thank you. And thank you
for inviting me tonight. This is pretty fun. I enjoy your page, and it's a great resource for people researching their families. So keep it up. You guys are doing a great job. So I started doing, well, my mother was into genealogy when I was a child, and I have to say that I didn't care. And I could picture times when I grew up where, my dining room table was just filled with paper and all, these trees. And it was during those times when, you would travel to a town or write a letter and wait 2 or 3 weeks for a response. And so it was a very painstaking process. I don't even know how long ago I started picking it up, because she'd come to tell me something and I would be like, I don't care. All of a sudden I started to care, and I was helping her take her information and put it on an online site. And in so doing, I drank the Kool-Aid, and I became just obsessed with it. And so in addition to just sort of working on my own genealogy, I just started doing it for everybody I knew, all my coworkers, all my friends, anybody I could get my hands on. I started joining as many of the online archival sites, because you get to a point where you can't get any more information unless you join newspapers.com. And I could spend a whole hour talking about how much I love newspapers.com. But anyway, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. The more I learn, the more I know I need to learn, if that makes sense. It's sort of like, a child looking out through a roof, a little hole, and there's one star, and you spend your whole life looking at the star, and then all of a sudden the roof opens up and you realize there's just so much information and so much history all around the world, and we're all just miracles of this big story that's really fun to put together. So I made a little business helping people get started. I don't want to pretend to be an expert in anything in particular, although I suppose I've probably spent most of my time in colonial New England. But that said, this journey has taken me all over the place. I've learned an awful lot of things, and I still have much, much to learn. But I love to bring people's families together. One of the things I was telling Kevin the other day is that I noticed, there was a time we lived with our grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, and our family clan grew up together. And then we spread out, and families don't tend to talk about their own family stories, I think, as much as they once did. And so I like to bring together families all together, maybe even on a platform like this, where we can interview some of the older members of the family about what they remember of their grandparents, or, and then supplement with interesting archival information, or whatever you can find. Sometimes you find photographs of people that they look just like them, and they never even heard of them. I mean, I could just go on and on with the fun things. It's like digging for treasure and reading novels.
So if somebody wanted to get started and somebody hasn't created their tree yet, or they have a tree that was passed down to them, and they're not quite sure if it's real, or if it's authentic or whatever, and how do you suggest they get started?
Well, one of the first things I tell people when they're getting started is to figure out what their goals are. Some people are very interested in what their ancestors did, who they were, what was the shape of their family or their neighborhood. Some people are really interested in the stories that the documents can tell, that can sort of put together the story of someone's life. Other people really just want, to see names and dates, and, be able to see the tree where they came from. Some people don't know much about their family at all, or were seeking some answers through DNA, and that's another wonderful supplement to research. I think that it's important to figure out your goals, take ridiculous notes, and ask questions of your family, even your own generation, even sisters and brothers, cousins. Somebody knows something that you didn't know, and you know something that they didn't know. But interview, ask around. That's what I would.
So when I started, I was in the New York Public Library one day in the 1980s, I think around the mid 1980s, And I was sitting reading a book, and I looked over, and there were these blue folders, and I noticed them, but I didn't pay much attention to them. I came back a few days later, and as I was sitting there reading, I noticed the folders again. I finally got up and walked over to them, and they're folders that were Family Trees by George Ernst. And there was like 60 of them, and I started to pull them out, and they were all the old family names in York. And my father never really told me about our family history other than that person's your cousin or that person's your cousin. And then I found out that, eighth cousins or ninth cousins. And how did he even know that? But he never told me how he got there. So anyway, I pulled out these books and these folders, and all of a sudden there's my grandfather and his grandfather and his grandfather. And and it showed who they'd married, and this whole new world had just opened up. And I'd grown up in New York, and I never realized that I was related to everybody. It was like one of those epiphanies.
You're related to everybody.
Wow. Yeah.
Kevin and I are 6 cousins.
At least.
That's cool.
And Elaine and I are third cousins. But so that was like really like I took the folder out of the library back then. You could take it home, and I transcribed it into my journal. And then at my business, people would see my name Freeman, and people would stop in a lot from Cape Cod area and Sandwich area where there was a lot of Freemans down there. And then they'd send me these family trees and say, we think this was your great grandfather. And Elaine helped me to disprove that, who's our guest tonight. And that's been really amazing. And I know that other people have had other experiences like that. But at the time, Ancestry wasn't available. And then when I went on to Ancestry for the first time, my computer just dinged for 2 days straight. It dinged all night long with those little hints that you have. I guess I had the alarm turned on. And then it was like, oh my God, I was like on coffee or something like for a couple of months after that.
Yeah.
So anyways, so that's I think that you can approach it with, just those old family Bible. You can have a revelation of that, or whatever methods you have. I kind of like to open up to Deb. I know Deb has a geographic area which she's very interested in.
If I could ask one question of Kristen, when you interview somebody or when you're a prospective client or something, do you warn them up front that what they can find could be negative or could be a shocker or
well, I don't try to lead with that, but I do explain that, sometimes you're related to kings and sometimes you're related to the guy that,
right.
Sometimes you're related to the guy that got hung or I mean, you just don't know. And so, yes, I've some sensitive issues, but
in DNA, they have the term FPE. You know that FPE, you ever see that term? And it's the false paternal event. And, 5 generations ago, it could have been 2 generations ago. A couple got married and the lady happened to be pregnant when she got married with somebody else's child. So this is something that, can happen. And
they're saying 2% of people that are giving their DNA, which is a really big number, are surprised by paternity somewhere in their tree. That's a huge number of people. There's a lot of secrets out there, I think.
Kevin, go ahead.
Well, when I did my DNA, we did it first with the Y chromosome, because the male shares the Y chromosome directly back in the generations. And
did you do 23andMe? Excuse me.
No, we use Family Tree was the first one. And, but anyways, we to check all our paperwork, which you eventually want to do. If you think you're satisfied with your paperwork, you should really do DNA to check it. So we had 4 cousins. And the last time we connected was 7 generations ago. And we shared a common ancestor. And 2 cousins were upstate New York, 1 cousin California, myself in Maine, and we matched perfectly, which was an amazing thing. And it's kind of like, there's no FPE so far. But then somebody matched us again perfectly, and his name was Luis Rodriguez from Puerto Rico, living now in Texas. And he said, "Hey guys, what's up? We're family. How do you think I fit in?"
Okay.
and nobody had the
Yep.
what withal to tell them that say, well, the Y chromosome is, you know, you don't fit in to the male side. So
Yeah.
that's what can happen. So you gotta, and then you find out things about people back in that did jail time. I found out that several of my ancestors were in the old jail in York. So,
Wow, that's cool.
well, I mean, minor stuff, you know, a little.
Those are the juicy bits.
But,
That's
you
what
know,
I call
they
it.
have a list of prisoners for the old jail at Old York, and in the 1730s, my family was Bridges, and there was a lot of Bridges in the old jail at that time. So that's my
The good news is it's empty now.
yeah. They're somewhere else now.
So Deb, you're gonna add to the conversation here.
Oh, well, I am. Both of my parents were born and raised in Ireland, so I was looking more for building a family tree, because when you're first generation born here, you just don't have that. So I've had a great time learning what's called genetic genealogy, and basically I've used DNA to really to build my family tree. Now you can do paper, as Kristin will tell you, but paper trails aren't always correct. And all of those hints on ancestry that come through, a lot of people just sort of take those hints and they build their trees. They don't really back them up. So one of the things when you build a tree, you really should do is make sure you back up when you're adding a new person, that you have their birth record, their baptismal, their, you know, all of those things. But what I found really fun for me is that I've been able to build a family tree, but also by doing the DNA test, is finding these sort of cousins who you've never heard of all over the world. And then you build their tree. So you spend, you know, a lot of time building their trees.
Wow.
And then you connect them to where you're connected. And right now, yesterday I spent time working on, there's a gentleman in his 70s living in Australia. And we know that we connect somewhere around 1814 in Tipperary, Ireland. But I am going to find the connection. But it's a great story where his ancestor was arrested for stealing a sheep during the famine and sent on a prisoner ship to Australia, and you know, but he has really no records, and I found lots of records for him. So I'm gonna figure out the mystery and share it with him at some point. But I found so many different people, and then built this huge tree and connected everybody. And
what do you use for a program?
Well, I have my tree on Ancestry. I just think it's the easiest, and you can store all the different paperwork and hints and photos of things all under one person's thing. But I'm on Ancestry, 23andMe, you know, my heritage, and I mean, I'm on all of them. But it's fun to really look even just beyond, you know, your immediate family or your ancestors who've all passed, but the people who are out there still that you've never met. And, you know, I've connected with people that, you know, when this pandemic's over, I'm traveling and I'm visiting all my cousins all over.
Right.
Yeah.
So I've loved it. And, but it's funny, so the term about surprises is called NPE. It's non-parental experience. Or episode, non-experience. Kristin might know the right terminology for that, but it's, you know, it's fun to you know, people lie, but DNA doesn't.
Yeah.
So
Right.
you know, birth records and all those things are not always correct. But
Even
you know,
the census records aren't correct necessarily.
no, they're not. It's so interesting to look
Very
through.
interesting.
I know. So anyway, I have a great time doing it, and meeting people and reaching out, and you know, a lot of people are interested in it and looking, and so it's fun. Anyway, I'll pass it on to somebody else.
Can I comment to Deb there a little bit?
Yeah.
I've done a fair amount of Irish
Mhm.
because I got dual citizenship, and I've been to the National Archives in Dublin a couple of times
Yep.
and all that. But I'm thinking of our viewers that are tuning in that says, oh, well, my grandmother's from Ireland. I can get that passport, or I can do this, or I can do that.
I got dual.
You being only second generation or born here wouldn't have the problems that a lot of people have. When I was writing Ireland to get my grandmother's long form birth certificate,
Mhm.
They'll only check 3 years. And if you told her 1895, they'll check 1895, 1894, 1896. And I said, they send it back. You send them $45. And they, couldn't find it. I said, wait a minute. I know this is my grandma. This is her parents. This is it. This is blah, 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 blah. Send it back another time. And I said, well, check 1897. No, they checked. No, back. No, Maria Kate Huzzy, born then. And so I was in Dublin, and I walked into the Registrar General on Lombard Street there and said to the woman, I said, hey, this is the problem I'm having with it. It's my grandmother, I know. Well, come to find out, she was born in 1893.
Yep.
And she lied about her age. She came over to this country as a sweet Colleen of 21 when she was actually 27.
Yeah.
And it was during the height of the Irish Civil War in 1920. And they didn't care what people were putting on their passports. So if you're tuning in tonight to our conversation saying, well, I know my grandfather was born, and it could be. The vanity issue seems to surface more in the ladies, I think, sometimes. But
yeah, there's a lot of great online resources of records, and even in Ireland, they just put a whole lot of new church records online just recently.
I use that one, irishgenealogy.ie.
Yeah, there's a new one. There's a new one that's up that just put a whole lot of church records like way far back.
This one's free. The one I use.
They're all it's free too. But anyway,
this month's Family Tree magazine. I don't know if you guys get Family Tree magazine, but they have a whole Irish ancestors section.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
And Canadian genealogy, and a lot of us in Maine have some Canadian genealogy. So pick up this month's issue.
You know what's funny on that is there's a woman who writes for that quite often named Penny Walters. She probably does some of the Irish and whatever.
Oh yeah.
She is one of my DNA relatives that we found each other.
Wow.
Oh, that's so interesting.
She actually does a lot of the before the pandemic, the conferences that you can go to in Salt Lake City and in Scotland and wherever.
Oh.
But now she's doing like a lot of online, but it ended up that we ended up being DNA matches. And so we email each other all the time.
Amazing.
I had a friend that hit me with a term a couple of years ago that he was a two-boater. Have you ever heard the term two-boater?
No.
The family came here, they went back to their country. And
No. You paid by the mileage to get to North America. So the cheapest place to get to was Nova Scotia. So they get off the boat at Nova Scotia, earned enough money in Nova Scotia, then got the money to go to Boston. And so they were two-boaters by the time they got here. But they paid by the mileage, so the wealthier ones got themselves down to Philadelphia, places like that. So that's a little more.
Yeah.
Lace curtain Irish or shanty Irish.
I have a question for Elaine. Once we get back far, like 4 or 5 generations, and there's no birth certificates and before the census has started and stuff like that, and you find these people, but maybe there's a court document or something. When is the point when you're like, okay, this is my 4th great grandmother, and how do you feel confident enough to put her in?
You put her in. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, you put her in, and then you find the proof that she really does belong in there. And that might be through, the thing about genealogy, I've been doing this since I was a kid, because I lived in a house that my family lived in since the 1840s.
Oh,
So I had I had Bibles, and I had, all kinds of resources right there for that part of the family.
amazing.
But if you get something like that, and you just don't know what's going to come out next. When I
Yeah.
first started, there were a few census records out, but every, so many years you get a new census record, you get a new, they're finding more things all the time. And family search. I tell people who are starting out, go to Family Search because it's free.
Yeah.
And you can look at things, you can find things, and you can find actual records, which is something you can't find other places.
Yeah.
But then if you're really into it, then go to Ancestry and the other places like that.
Yeah. And so the other day, going back to 2 points, I finally made a connection back to Peter Ware, and through Sarah, who is turned into Sarah Bowden, I think. And so, and then, so this might, Kevin, this might make our cousinship, it might sort of erase that. But so Abraham Bowden and Sarah got married, and then I put her in because it was everything seemed to fit in, and there was 20 family trees that said yeah, and then they had all these sources. So I said yeah, and so then it said, do you want to confirm these sources? There was a court record, and it just said guilty of fornication, and then I was like, okay, so what does that? I'm like. I just was like, that's it. I don't really know what to do. Is when, where, why, why. So anyways, all of those circumstances of that verdict were like unknown to me. But then I really wanted to get to Peter Ware as my 6th great grandfather. So it's like, so what would you do? Like, I was going to actually email you about that. Elaine.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I'm, like I said, I may not have the answer.
Yeah.
But
you can keep a question mark. You can keep, you can keep
you
notes
can,
of yourself that says
Right.
It's an ongoing search, but this is my best guess, and this is what most of the evidence, and this is what I'm gonna, build on and look around. And sometimes I'll even keep information about, I was working on a tree recently where I had a couple exact same names, exact same dates, married to each other. One couple lived in New Jersey, both immigrants. They immigrated the same year, whole thing. One couple was in New Jersey, one couple was in Chicago. And so for a long time, I was getting them confused. And so I just kept records of both until I could eliminate any confusion. And sometimes you have to just keep a lot of information until you can rule stuff out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Has anybody done entered their GEDCOM file into that big database? I don't know what it's called.
GEDmatch.
GEDmatch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that, and I guess I probably should mention, in Ireland now, and even in Scotland, I belong to a couple of Facebook pages that you can put your GEDmatch number in, and it's County Kerry DNA, or Iveragh Peninsula, which my family's from, Iveragh Peninsula, and you can put your GEDmatch number into that. I did another one for Scottish DNA, and I got some hits out of it. And I went to my moderator of my group, who was a retired sociology professor, and he said, the way that they do that DNA, it's not as you can't go back 6 generations and say positively that is, you might have a strain of that DNA, and so.
So the farther back you go, the more inconclusive it is.
Yeah, and
tracing your male gene.
And which DNA they take, the mitochondrial or the Y chromosome. If it's Y chromosome, that's gospel. But and the trouble with DNA companies, I think they're all great, but they don't share DNA.
No, it's like Samsung and Apple.
Yeah. They don't.
Never the two shall meet.
If I was going to advise somebody that was starting out and wanted to really get involved with DNA, I'd say, get the entry level from 2 or 3 different companies. This gentleman I was trying to help from California had tested with the 4 big ones. And he gave me matches of people that are walking around town that I've known all my life that, sure, probably I would have known they were Denell. They would have been related to me. And sure enough, they were. But Doggy Donnell tested with 23andMe. And this other guy, Billy Donnell, and that family up on Rains Neck, they tested with Ancestry. I tested with Family Tree. So so I don't know. I mean, if I was going to advise somebody, I would get in they do sales on that stuff right after Christmas. Get in the $59 entry level, and you want a lot of hits, you go 3 different companies and take it from there. I would say.
Kristin.
I would add to that by saying that, again, like your genealogy goals, I think people have DNA goals. And some people really want to just, meet cousins or meet people that are out there. Other people want to try to solve mysteries. And so, and some people want to find out about health related issues. And so so for example, if you want to know about health related things, then I think I would recommend going to 23andMe. That's sort of their company's focus. They do I think I took 1,200, answered 1,200 questions about, food and habits and sleeping and all sorts of things. And if you think about it, imagine what that's going to do to a big database over time. And, it's just, what we're feeding into is just, it's mind boggling all that they'll be able to do. On the other hand, if your goal is to find family members or, in my case, I have a great grandmother who I learned was adopted on her marriage certificate. So Ancestry is the perfect place to go to solve family history things, because you can connect to people that you're related to that are out there that have given their DNA samples, and start to look at their trees. I think it's probably how you solve some things, and compare and contrast, finding, writing down common names, and you can fill in the blanks or look at census records, and so once you isolate out family members, Kevin, you had mentioned earlier seeing someone in town that you knew you were related to, and this guy from California. Well, in Ancestry, there's a button you can push that you can isolate and say who you and this California guy are related to together. And so, and it takes away everybody else that you're related to. And then you find this really juicy bit of information, because you can figure out how closely you're related. And, and if you're third cousins and you share, a set of great grandparents, and, you can go from there. Some of the tricky parts, however, and I think we talked a little bit about this the other day, Kevin, is that every tree that I've ever done has this. So this is just the way it is. Sometimes cousins marry cousins. Sometimes, sometimes in small villages, after 2-3 generations, we have people that are marrying each other, or the same families marrying each other and then having all these people. So you're related to somebody on Ancestry through 2 or 3 family names, because they all lived in the same town. And so it sometimes can skew the results, if you know what I mean. It looks like you're you're closer related to someone, when really you're just related to them because you have 2 or 3 branches in common. And so
interesting. How does that work? So in through lines, so you have the same amount of genetic material, though
through lines is pretty specific, because they're taking your tree, and they'll take your tree and Elaine's tree, and they'll find that ancestor because you both have a tree that's been published.
Yeah.
So they'll take your DNA and they'll put those tree together. And so the through lines is sort of is not necessarily matching your DNA because it's matched. It's matching your DNA because of the trees that you've associated yourself.
So they've come up with some sort of an algorithm, presumably, but Elaine and I would still share a small sequence of our DNA unequivocally, right? Because it is a sequence. That's
but through lines is using hints or using information from people's trees that are not necessarily always correct.
Yeah, but so sometimes it says you have in common 68 CMs with this person, and then you figure that is, and it says it might be a 6th or 7th cousin or something like that. But I see it can become convoluted as you have more ancestors in town that are contributing to the DNA pool, or
Right. You're related to 2 or 3 people. You're related to a Perkins and a Ware, and pretty soon it gets.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question that I'd like to put out there for everybody. So like my ancestors came probably like in the 1700s. And now on my maternal side, my grandfather was Irish and he lived up in Cape Breton for several generations and then moved to Rockport, Massachusetts. And so like, but where I am, like, and the property that I live on and everything is like, you know, it's been in my family for generations and generations. And I can look out the window right now and see the house that I grew up in. I lived on the same road forever and I feel completely at home. I'm like, wow, I don't think I could feel any, you know, when I go down, wherever I go, I think my great grandparents were here and they were doing this and I knew where the stores were and all
You're
that kind of
really
stuff.
lucky.
Well, that's a question that I have. My wife, on the other hand, is a first generation British person, and you know she's doing her genealogy too, and our experiences are so different. And so we planned on this trip last summer to go to England and go to her hometown, and then COVID prevented us from doing that. But
Me too.
and I've always felt at home here. And then I was like, but I thought, you know, and so I can trace a lot of my ancestry back to England. And obviously, and so when we were planning this trip, I was really specifically working on that area. And then I had this glint and I was like, wow, I think that I'm going to be really at home in England and specifically Marlborough, where one of my great grandfathers had been buried. And then I was like, wow, this is like, so is the DNA like, is geographically specific? Do you actually feel and yearn that you're at home or that you want to get back home? And I think that doing your ancestry actually gives you more of an instinct that maybe you're not in the right place. And I'm just wondering if anybody else feels like that or what they feel about geographically being placed or displaced.
I
Well,
identify
Um,
I
I would say,
identify more with the Irish than my mother's side, but be- they're the last ones to come over, and it was I don't know why I just love my Irish side more than my.
So Kevin, but do you feel like you want to go back to Ireland? Is that like your home, or do you feel like you're
I've
home?
tried to buy land there and everything, but
Okay.
I haven't been. I got enough investment in the town of York, but yeah, I mean, I just love it. But I can't find the immigrant generation to my Scottish side, and whether he's an Ulster Scot that came in the 1718 migration, or Elaine knows that I was working on a project 10 years ago, and that's still a theory that he possibly came out of the McIntyre clan that was here. So I don't know, but we've been and there's another situation where I tried to find a DNA donor from the original McIntyre clan, but nobody does that. They say, well, we already know. Well, we know what we all know. Well, sometimes you're not doing it just for yourself. You're going to help somebody else down the road too. So
Yeah.
I would love to know the immigrant generation, but brick walled at that, as the common term is in genealogy. Go ahead, Jeff.
I think you'll find in the next few years, with more and more people being interested in this as a hobby, more and more people offering up their DNA, I think some of those brick walls will be broken down.
I read an article that said that if they test X amount of people, they could pretty much tell us where we're all from.
Oh,
you know,
isn't that fascinating? It really is.
And it's not that great a number, but they're also putting a time frame on it within 2050 or something like that. They could tell us.
They'll be able to figure out what people looked like, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing.
Well, and I think part of that feeling of being at home is like, I know, your body ingests foods over generations and over centuries when you live in one place, and then your DNA actually kind of like your body has the nutrients to be able to break those things down more efficiently. And then when you move and you're displaced, all of a sudden it becomes tougher. So like, and I guess maybe I didn't frame my question quite exactly right, but like, so if you look at pictures of like Ireland, if you have a lot of if your ancestors are from Ireland, like for example, when I look at pictures of China, I don't feel like, oh, that's my home. I want to go there, or Nepal, but I'm interested in Nepal. But like when I see pictures of England and Ireland, I'm like, whoa, I have that connection.
Yeah.
I think it's probably in your DNA if you're asking. I'm really into how DNA affects like psychology, for example. There's a study that's out. I I think it was Duke University. I'll have to cite it later, where they studied mice, and they took mice and introduced them to the smell of cherry blossoms. And it was fine, no big deal. Everything was great. And then soon they started to slowly, sorry guys, they gently like poisoned the mice with the smell of the cherry blossoms. And then pretty soon they were scared. They gave fear response to the smell of cherry blossoms. Then they brought them back to health, and they had them have children. The second generation avoided cherry blossom smell, had the sense of fear, and what is that? That is, I don't know, proving, or I guess not the word proving, maybe
I think it's called
suggesting.
memory.
It's suggesting that DNA memory from life is gone through, like an experience in life. And it makes you think about things that, people went through fear. How did fearful times or times of famine,
Right.
those kinds of things that you can figure out through genealogy, those stories, or even through newspapers, tragedy, trauma, those
Yeah,
kinds of things.
Civil War battles was one of them. Like they can tell, if your ancestors were in the same battle, that's very specific, because it must have been the fear that just your body, the chemistry in your body must have just been overwhelmed and transformed.
Imagine if that whole mice story translates into humans, all the things that we're carrying the stories of our people. And I just find that kind of interesting from sort of a psychological spin.
I'd like to welcome Dan to our group. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Dan.
Dan is a cousin to a few of us.
Hello there. Yeah.
Oh, hi, Dan.
I thought I'd log on for one specific reason, just not to take a lot of time. But I've shared it with Kevin. I just came across this treasure trove of old photographs, like of family, the Freeman family, starting with that. Almost none of them are labeled. And I wondered if they clearly go back to tintypes, like back generations. And I just wonder if there's somebody that would like to do something with these. I don't have the time to do much with it, but
I would scan them and then return them to you.
let me just, can
Put
I
them
just
up
show
one by
you
one.
what I'm talking about? Like, so, I mean, this is old, obviously, and
Yeah, that's amazing.
it's just, there's 3 of these.
Wow.
And it with, I don't know, 100 or
Let's be a
more.
lesson. Label your photographs.
I know.
Yeah.
Right. We spoke about that a couple of weeks ago, and it, somebody gave me 5 bags of albums, or great albums, but there's no names on anything. So it's like,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
A lot of these are taken by this photographer right here, which was in New York, out on the beach. Goff, I don't know how to pronounce it.
he was he
G-O-U-G-H.
ran a photography studio. He
Yeah.
lived next to the Union Congregational Church,
Oh,
and he he ran a grocery store in his older years, but he was a professional photographer. W.N. Goff. You see his name on the back of a lot of photographs.
There's probably 40 or 50 that he took.
Wow.
Here's one that actually has a name. It's on the back. It says Edith, August 31st, 1905, by Beatrice Hannaford, Portland. Now I looked her up on Ancestry and found Beatrice. I don't know who Edith is. I don't know her surname. But
did you put that photograph on Ancestry?
What's that?
Did you share your photograph to Ancestry?
Well, again, like you were saying, I don't know where to put this. Since I have no surname, I wouldn't know what to do with it, Anyway, I just thought if anybody wants to play with this, some of us are addicts, I know. Anyway.
Yeah. Dan, I would look at those and scan them if you'd like, and then I could post them and I'll return them all to you. I don't think
what's a good way to get them to you? Like email or
are you coming by this way to see your mom or something sometime?
Yep, that could be a possibility. Just
If
drop
you-
them off.
Yeah, I could meet you here or at home, or you could just drop them off right here at the shop if you'd like.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Deb, I wanted to ask you, going back to my question about feeling at home.
Yep.
So you must have some feelings about that.
You know, when I have been in Ireland, I feel incredibly comfortable, even though I didn't grow up there. I just feel like when I look around, I look like other people. I feel comfortable. So yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that way. I don't feel like I want to live there. I mean, I like going there because I have, you know, my family and all my children are here.
Yeah.
But, you know, but I definitely feel like, I think the food is delicious. You know, I love being there. And I will say, like, Ancestry can tell me, like, you know, it breaks down. You have ancestors in County Kerry and Tipperary. I mean, they're very specific when matching.
Wow. Did your parents come from a similar geographic location?
One from County Kerry and one from Tipperary.
So, wow.
So I mean, Ancestry is completely dead on.
Wow.
And the more and more people add their DNA, the more specific they're able to get. So even the last few years, you've probably noticed it's adjusted a little bit. The DNA doesn't change, but
Well, yeah. So here's another question. But before I ask another question, Elaine, I'm speculating that you feel right at home here.
Sure, I do. I've been here since the 1630s, you might say, through my family.
Wow.
But on my father's side, his mother came from England. But the thing about thinking about living or going to places where they lived, like my grandmother grew up in Manchester, England. And I see it as when she was there. And I think I'd be very disappointed if I went back now and see it as a big city.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a big city then, but it was different.
Yeah.
And it's even like we have the Leaches that live down in Penobscot. And I've been down there and I'm thinking, this isn't how it was when they were there.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to mention is that many times when you find a match or a close match on DNA and you contact these people, they're not interested. All they really want to know is, am I Irish? Am I Italian? You know, they don't care.
Yeah.
And they will never return your message. But except I have one guy whose father was one of those people who's found out later that his grandmother had an affair with somebody. So his father really his father's father wasn't his. His biological father was different. So I think this man was mostly upset because he had already built a wonderful family tree with his supposed grandfather. And now he has to start again. And somehow I'm connected to him. He's found it in Heritage and he keeps contacting me and I have no clue.
Yeah.
I can't figure out where the connection is. But I thought he had something that he was going to be able to help me. But the two of us are just like, every once in a while he contacts me and says, do you have this person and this person? I was like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
But someday
are you on Ancestry with this person or on a different site? Did you say?
I put my DNA up on my Heritage. I don't have a membership in Heritage, but I actually put my family tree up there because 23andMe, you could put your family tree up in Heritage originally, and then they changed and Heritage went off and did their own DNA thing. So my tree is still sitting there. I have too many people in it. I keep getting the warning. I have too many people, but I just don't touch it because it just leaves it alone.
But if you had Ancestry, I don't know as much about my Heritage, but Ancestry, again, you can isolate you and this other person. You can isolate.
He's not on Ancestry.
Yeah, that's too bad.
You can do that. You can do that on my Heritage as well.
Oh, good. Okay.
But in my Heritage really has a lot of people from the UK and Ireland and those areas. But Ancestry has the largest database of all of the companies. I mean, if somebody's going to go in one place, that's the one place to test.
Mhm.
Which
I
one
think.
was that?
Ancestry.
Ancestry, yeah.
So we're getting up towards the hour mark, but I want to put this question out there. So I had my DNA done on Ancestry, and before they did the new algorithm or whatever they did, I was like 1% Libyan. I really wanted some racial diversity, but I didn't get any. But when I said that 1% Libyan, I was like, yeah, that's awesome. And then they changed it and they took that away, and I was 32% Irish, and now I'm 37% Irish. And the question that I have that I can't get past is like, I only had my grandfather was Irish, and I can trace him back to, Canada in 1792. And then when he came across from Inverness or someplace, and then but if I look at all of my other, there's no Irish names or anything in any place else in my tree. And I'm like, how can that be? How can I have 37% Irish if I only have this one grandfather that was Irish, and his gene pool had to be convoluted as it came down, marrying all these English people?
I would have to look at it before I could begin to. I don't know the answer. It seems like a high percentage, like a full grandparent. Like it's close to 25% at 37. I mean,
You're
Yeah,
probably just
so
picking up a little bit from somebody else.
yeah.
Your
yeah,
parents before that.
yeah.
And it's not, I mean, 25, 37, 3, I mean,
You're not
you
going
could trace
to
them out.
get an exact 25% from one grandparent. You're going to get a little more or less from.
Yeah, that's what it says, but that's quite a bit more than the others. So it's like, okay, yeah. All right.
I have a question or a consensus that I'd like to ask that I feel that I am the first generation. I know it's a little different for Deb because her mother did the genealogy, but has anybody run into the thing? Previous generations didn't ask questions. You weren't supposed to ask them questions. They sort of had a tough existence. I talked about this. I was in France at a bed and breakfast off of Omaha Beach, and this guy was my age, and he ran the bed and breakfast. He was an Englishman, and he said, "No, nobody ever talked about that stuff in my house. We don't. So I think has anybody found that the previous generations had hard times and they didn't want to remember a lot, or do you think that's a common analysis here?
I think so.
Anybody, Debbie? Elaine?
I agree. They
I
just
agree.
don't want
If
to.
they came from other countries, I think they were happy to leave,
Yeah.
come to their new life and just start a new life.
My granny never went back. Left when she was 27, never went home. And left 3 brothers and a set of parents behind.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
Common.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, in general, the thing that interests, a lot of people go on to Ancestry or something to find the famous person.
Right.
That's what they're hoping for,
Well,
That was not my motivation. It was very different. I wanted to find out who I was. And
yeah.
for the
yeah,
very
I
reason
did too.
you were just saying, that I notice every time there's a heavy oppression, whether you're an immigrant or poor, the family tree stops. You can almost see the damage done somewhere along to the family. And so they're actually one of my cousins I met on Ancestry. He lives like 40 miles from here, and we didn't know each other. We're first cousins. So that's, that kind of thing. And I saw his family tree and I texted him, I said, I think my mother and your mother are brother and sister. And it's like that, and we found each other. Like a lot of my cousins on both sides of my family, like first cousins, second cousins have found each other, but hard things that happened in the past split the family up.
Yeah. Yeah.
People went quiet. That's
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. So.
Yeah. Yeah. My family was prone to feuding.
Oh, there's a question up from Keith Bishop. I just saw a question on my thing.
Can you read? Oh, what about the name or spelling difference, like English versus French?
Elaine, you want to tackle that? Because Keith Bishop was a Raleigh.
Uh-huh.
You want to,
I
Keith.
don't think that's my expertise. Mine are all English.
Even English names change. Sometimes they write them down with different spellings. I think it's important as researchers to be open to all the different ways that a name can be spelled until you can eliminate
Oh, you see it. And
so
you know,
many ways.
when you get a document, when you get something from Ancestry, you're getting what the enumerator heard when he took the census in 1920.
Sure.
Yeah.
And my family name was Egan, and I've seen it spelled Agin on a
Sure.
census when it was Eagan.
Right.
So you're taking what the enumerator heard, then you're taking what the person entering into the database is reading on
Right.
so you've got, it's touched 2 or 3 hands by the time it gets to you.
Yeah.
Right.
I like to answer Keith's question, but I don't have the answer. But thank you for asking.
Thank you for
I know
asking.
on Ancestry, when you search, it will often come up with variations, records where the name is variated. So it will search similar names.
And you can check that as a box, as an option
Oh.
Mhm.
when you're
Awesome.
searching. There's a box that says you can, search names that sound like it.
Yeah.
Most of my ancestors couldn't read or write before 1780. I found
Yeah.
they made
That's
their
how
mark.
short names are misspelled.
So
Yeah.
But those of us, I think everybody here has some kind of experience in genealogy. Can't you make a case for teaching children cursive? Look at all our history.
I wish.
I know. Everything's in cursive. All
Deb,
the,
I
all
want
the
to
documents are in cursive.
That will
Deb,
be a
I want to
high-paying
promote your
job
little
to
business. I
decipher
think
it.
you've got the heart for it. So I put a plug in for you. I think you got a great heart for it. I have to leave here momentarily, but I'm going to leave you with a famous quote that Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote his very dear friend, Henry David Thoreau, who was out in Walden Pond, and they were best of buddies. And Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "You'll never see a gray-haired Irishman in the city of Boston. These guys come over from Ireland, they work themselves to death 12 hours a day for 50 cents. You will never see a gray-haired Irishman in the city of Boston." So that's how many of them came through. That's my famous quote for the day.
Yeah. I think they're expected to live about 7 years over here at the beginning.
Oh, how about the Fighting 69th? They got them off in New York and put them right in the Civil War.
Yeah.
Oh,
Took them off the ship.
so many immigrants came here and went straight into some war. It's amazing how quickly we find them.
I think we're going to wrap it up because it is 8 o'clock and we try to keep it to 45 minutes. So we exceeded that.
Very interesting. I could go on for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, this is great.
I think we all can.
Yeah. So we'll have to do it again. And I see that we have a lot of people watching on Facebook too. So this is like a banner night, I think, for that. So hopefully it's been interesting to a lot of people.
If we didn't answer your questions, we still like them, and we like your pictures. We like your input, and we're just trying to preserve the history of York. So
yeah. So thank you, everybody.
Read documents.
And thank you, Kristin, for joining us, and everybody else. Kristin's business is Kin Connection, if anybody is interested in getting in touch with her. And that's a wrap. We're gonna close off Facebook, but if the guests want to stay on here for a second, you're welcome to. But I'm gonna go off Facebook right now.
good.
Which doesn't mean we're off Facebook, by the way. So don't say anything incriminating yet.